I want to have us to start thinking longer term now, which is sort of a weird feeling because Christina, you and I were just sort of talking about this, about how we just have this new normal for all of us, whether it's in our personal lives with family, social lives with friends, if it's in our work, if it's with our finances, if it's just how we're living day to day. Things have changed so drastically that we just had to quickly scramble to find that comfortable spot where we just sort of had everything just sort of like manageable so that we could just exist in this new situation, right? So it is sort of hard to think longer term now and to think about what's going to happen, what I call in your AQL, your after quarantine life.
I love that.
So that's what I've been trying to do in terms of like my work, right? Is thinking about, wow, I used to go around and see people in person and would rarely try to spend time working at home and might go in and out of an office, and whatever your situation is, we sort of had to adapt very quickly and change that up. And now we have to maybe start thinking about what's going to happen on the other side, whether it's in a month, whether it's, in 6 months from now, how are things going to look for you in sort of all those areas of your life? And so when it comes to our personal finances, I want to start thinking about how best to restore our financial wellness for that AQL, the after quarantine life. So there's a couple of longer term things that probably we really haven't thought about recently that maybe we can take some of this time during quarantine to sort of work on and maybe make some progress on. And that is our credit, making sure that our credit situation is healthy. And what I mean by healthy is not that we necessarily have to wipe out all of our debt, but that we are managing our lenders, we're managing what we owe. We know exactly where we're at, right? As I've always talked about, that's sort of our biggest hurdle is understanding, where our credit history is. What is our credit score? What does our credit report say about our past behaviors with our credit? How are we managing it right now? And now is a really great time to move ahead and make some progress on some of this, especially while we have the time. Like I mentioned before, now is a good time to contact your lenders. Now is a good time to maybe see in your budgeting if you're able to divert more towards that minimum monthly payment to maybe wipe out a little bit more of your balance over time, right? So that's what I mean by managing credit wellness, right? And managing debt aggressively. So typically during these periods of time of uncertainty, that's when we pause, right? Our psychology, our financial sense, if you will, tells us like we have to pause. We have to pause on everything, right? Because the future is uncertain. It's sort of unknown. My spending's going to be unknown. My savings going to be unknown. So why, Brian, would I even try to budget for or even work on paying down my debt aggressively? Like that's the last of my worries right now. I got to worry about income. I got to worry about paying my rent, my other expenses, maybe pausing some of those other expenses during COVID. And we sort of put credit and debt on the back burner. But if you want to be more strategic about it, now is the perfect time to manage it a lot more aggressively. So we're going to talk about that in just a bit here today. Now is also a good time to restore your savings. Maybe in the first couple of months of COVID, March, April, you had to dip into savings because you were waiting for unemployment to kick in. You were waiting for the extra federal assistance, the $600 a week to kick in. Maybe you're waiting to see from your employer how many hours you were going to actually be working. Would your hours be cut? Would you be furloughed? Sort of in that time of uncertainty, maybe you had to dip into your savings, cover some of your expenses, Or maybe you were just simply caught off guard when we went into quarantine around March 13th. Maybe you just didn't really have any savings at all at that time. Maybe you had some major expenses just prior. Maybe like me, maybe you were waiting for your tax refund. And you were sort of mentally banking on having that for savings. And then now things are sort of backlogged and moving at a slower pace at the IRS. So whatever situation was happening, maybe you either didn't have savings or you had to use it. Now is a great time to start building that back, especially as we turn the corner into fall and head into the holidays. Imagine us having to balance the COVID situation, our work situation, our income situation, and now the holidays are going to be rolling around. So maybe restoring your savings is something you want to work on as a short-term 3 to 6 month goal. Also, who has even thought at the moment about Social Security? Now is a great time as a long-term activity to check in on Social Security. And we'll talk about ways that you can follow up on that and sort of start planning for that source of income as you prepare and get closer to retirement. And then, like we were talking about last week, maybe there's other ways to leverage other assistance programs like CalAble, like we were talking with Arlene about, to find additional help, right? So once we sort of stabilize things over the last 4, 5, 6 months, now we can sort of look ahead and say, where else can I find help for other things that I was just trying to juggle and balance and manage myself, right? So let's talk about credit health first. Now is a great time, if you didn't have the time before, to check one of those credit bureaus. And we had some great questions come in about a month or so ago from one of our workshop attendees when we were actually meeting in person. She contacted Christina and had some questions about credit. So I felt like this is obviously a pain point for a lot of us. It's a hot topic that's probably never really going to go away, even when we're managing our credit and debt very well. Now is a great time for us to check in on one of these credit bureaus to see what is our credit score. That's one thing. Number two, what is our credit report saying about our past behaviors? Is it accurate? And Arlene, we've talked about this in multiple past workshops, but I wanted to cover that again today, just as a refresher. There are currently now 3 credit bureaus, okay? So basically 3 companies, right? And I call them companies because you have to understand that they are for-profit businesses. They are companies who are compiling this data, organizing this data, and then giving you this data because they're making money, okay? They're making money from lenders. They're making money from the public, from borrowers like you, checking your score, getting credit report, dealing with your lenders, right? So let's be clear about that these are not nonprofits. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their own hearts. They are businesses and they're trying to make money, right? So there are 3 of them. And one of the questions, I think that was a really great question, is shouldn't I be able to look at Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion and see the same credit score across all 3? Wouldn't it be the same? Isn't it all the same information and the same data? The answer is no, it's not. So you could have a 620 credit score at Experian. You may have a slightly higher score at Equifax, right? And you might have an even lower score at TransUnion. You could have 3 different scores at 3 different credit bureaus, which to us as the consumer makes absolutely 0 sense, right? Because then it then begs the question of, well, depending on what credit card I'm applying for, or depending on that car that I'm borrowing and I'm going to try to finance it, the lender, whoever they check with, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, they could get a completely different score. But of course, I want them to get the best score. And I have no control over that, which is very difficult for us as consumers. The reason that you have a different score at each company is because each company is getting, I wouldn't say different information. They're getting either complete or various levels of information from lenders. So for example, you may have a Visa card that Equifax is getting the data from, but maybe Experian doesn't have that card as part of your credit report, your credit history. So that's going to affect the score, right? So the feeds of data and information to these companies can be different from various lenders. So you may have a lower score somewhere because that credit report is, for lack of a better term, incomplete. There's not enough data there, right? So a lot of times people have trouble with that across all three, right? So I don't think it's really necessary per se, right, that you check all three. You should at least be checking one of those reporting companies for your credit score at a minimum of one time per year, right? At least once annually. So if you haven't done that in 2020, now's a good time to do that before the end of the year, because maybe during COVID, there's some time for you to sort of maybe work on some inaccuracies, work on some errors, or maybe just identify, wow, I put that one MasterCard in my dresser drawer a long time ago, totally forgot about it, and I still have a balance. And that $20 balance that I forgot about is now going to collections. And that stupid little balance is going to affect my credit score. Like, for example, my wife had some procedures a couple years ago. And one of the doctor's offices in those procedures, we had an outstanding balance of $8.
Oh my gosh.
And, yeah. And they decided that they were just going to put it to collections.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's ridiculous. So instead of really trying to reach out and contact us, now I should say I was probably guilty of maybe not opening all my statements and bills because ignorance is bliss. And I probably missed that $8 bill. But even something like that, if you can catch that, now is a perfect time to sort of, lasso that in and get that under control, right? Because we don't want those sort of things sort of dangling on our credit report and, keeping us from a better score that we might deserve. So what makes up that score, right? That's a question that I get all the time as well, okay? So basically, major borrowing or lending that you've had to tap into for a vehicle, for student loans, for consumer credit. What I mean by consumer credit is any credit cards or department store cards, gas cards, anybody that offers you the ability to borrow and put something or charge something onto a card. You can go get new tires for your car, and the tire store may have their own in-house credit card. So you could purchase your 4 new tires on that card. That's what I mean by a store card or a department store card. We've talked about Macy's cards and Target cards, and there's a card for everything. Everybody has the ability to be able to lend money out to their customers. And so we have a lot of these cards because maybe in an emergency, you didn't have the cash to buy those 4 tires, but you need it because you got to get to work. So you put it on that, tire credit card. So that goes into your score. Student loans affects your score. Little things, right? Things that you owe, like your utilities, are no longer a part of your credit score. Let's say you owe the IRS. Let's say you have a tax lien and you're trying to pay back past due amounts to the IRS and you're paying installments. IRS is not reporting that to these credit agencies. Okay. So sometimes people start panicking when they're like, oh my gosh, I missed my gas bill last month. And I'm 30 days past due. Is that going on my credit report? Okay. Something that people ask me about a lot is, what about if I just apply for a credit card? They call that a soft credit check, right? What if I go to buy a car and they're going to check my credit before they offer me financing? Are all these checks going to show up? Yes, they are. They don't necessarily affect your score, but if I was a lender, I could go in and check one of these bureaus and see how many soft credit checks that you had done in the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. That gives me a clue as to, are you going around asking all sorts of people to borrow money? That signals to me that you could be a risk because you're unable to have the necessary funds to make purchases, and you're borrowing to make all of these purchases. Chances are likely that you may not pay me back. So you are a credit risk. And that's why they monitor those soft checks. So like we've talked about before, all these offers and deals, you get a free t-shirt, you get a free bag, you get a whatever if you just fill out an application to apply for a Visa card. I mean, all those soft checks are being compiled. It's not worth the darn t-shirt that you got. So just be mindful of that. Okay. Now, what if you get into a situation where the debt and your credit is just out of control? It's gotten to the point where it's such a stress. There's so much anxiety associated with it, and you're so far behind. Something that I recommend to everybody as a starting point is checking with the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. Okay. This is a nonprofit. Okay. This is not a company that's charging a fee. This is not debt consolidation. This is not, debt elimination. It's none of that. It's simply credit counselors who will hear your situation, help you get organized and plan for sort of battling that debt and hopefully paying it down. If they feel like there's no way that you could do it on your own, you couldn't DIY it yourself and pay it down because it's just not manageable. The debt that you've accumulated is far too great for the income and the resources that you currently have. They will then advise you on issues of bankruptcy, issues of debt consolidation, things like that. Okay, but they will help you formulate a plan, which is super, super helpful, right? It's totally anonymous. It's not like you have to open up and reveal all your deepest, darkest secrets to this person about your spending and about your debt and so on. But they're there to help. The website also, even if you don't speak to someone, has a lot of very helpful resources. Well, let's say you want to do it yourself. Okay. We've talked about this before, and we didn't have a lot of time to touch on it in our last series, but I want to bring it up again. Let's say that during COVID, you are thinking long-term and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to emotionally detach myself from my debt, and I'm going to just make it a competition with myself to make it a goal to make some progress on my debt. So whether you eliminate one small debt, hey man, that's a victory. Or whether you're going to go gung-ho and plan to work on eliminating all of it, more power to you. You can start small or big. And like we've talked about before, there's two different ways to organize this, right? So first step, obviously, to organize it, you've got to go figure out, right, what debt you have. Now, that's why going to one of those credit bureaus first is a great starting point. rather than digging through your piles of statements and bills, right? Or looking in that box where you shoved everything.
What are you talking about, Bryan? Nobody does that.
I'm only saying that because I'm guilty of it. I could pull one out of my closet right now, as show and tell if you wanted to. Yeah, no, like we're all like, that's just human behavior. So, rather than trying to figure out, I know I had that Discover card from like 2004, and I got to get back on it and figure out what's what. Start with the credit bureau and see what is actually on your credit report. What is currently active and open? And then work backwards from there to then go and organize your bills and your statements. So if your credit report is listing 5 open credit cards, then go find those 5 statements, get them all organized. I don't care if you do it physically and you have 5 piles in front of you, or 5 files, or you do it on Excel spreadsheet. However you're going to do it, you've got to figure out, 1, what you owe, what the current interest rate is, and what your monthly payment is. And I mean, the statistics just show us that a majority of Americans don't know what the interest rates are currently on their cards, and they don't even know what their monthly payment is, because they've got it on online bill pay, which is good because then it's being paid on time, right? Or they've just simply abandoned paying it at all, right? And that's why we could be left with that random dangling account that has $20 balance on it, just because we just forgot about it. So let's organize what we owe first, and then we've got to really, really figure out what we owe on every single card. That's super important, because that's going to determine whether you're going to tackle the small debts first or the large debts first. If you have a card that has 23% interest rate, we got to do something like yesterday, right? So what I mean by we got to do something is, if you can't pay it off, obviously what we got to do is we have to contact that lender, like we talked about before, and say, what can you do right now to lower that interest rate? And they're going to give you the runaround. That's what they're trained to do. Okay. So we're trained as consumers to call them and ask for a lower rate. They're trained by their supervisors to say, well, I can't really do anything. That's above my job title. I can't help you. Hoping that you will say, well, okay, I guess I'll try again. You'll hang up and you'll go away. No. So like Christina's saying, you got to get past that person and say, well, then let me speak with your supervisor or connect me to the department that can actually do something and take care of this, right? And like I said before, you have to go in with a plan to ask for something specific. My interest rate is 23%. If you say, I just need a lower interest rate, they might say, well, how about 20? Well, that's good and all, but that's not going to help you. So have in mind what you're wanting to do. Like I said before, are you trying to negotiate for a 10% interest rate? Or are you simply trying to negotiate for a lower monthly minimum payment? Or are you calling to say, look, my current payment is $120 a month, and during COVID, I can't do this. And I'm not going to be able to do this probably for another 3 to 4 months, let's say, whatever your plan is. And then say, can you split up this payment? Can you reduce this payment at least for that time period? And then we'll sort of renegotiate or come back to it then. Like, know what you're going to be asking for. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay. Then from there, once you have everything organized, once you know what your interest rate is, and maybe you've made some phone calls, now's the time to take action and decide, right? Am I going to start at the top of the mountain, at the peak that has the smallest amount of mountain on it, that smallest debt, and am I going to roll that snowball downhill so that it picks up momentum, picks up more snow, and I'm tackling more and more debt as it rolls down the hill, right? Am I going to look at my smallest debt and get rid of that first? Like I've always said before, we need psychological victories, we need to be able to come back into this workshop at some point 3 months from now and say, guess what, guys? I paid off 2 of my credit cards. Awesome. You need to tell your friends, like, I got rid of that Target card. Like, that is you verbalizing your success, and that's going to make you, one, it's going to make you feel good, it's going to make you happy, and it's going to make you want to keep going, right? So maybe if you know, man, I don't have the patience to knock out these big debts first because I'm probably just going to give up, go with the small ones first. Reorganize your spreadsheet, put the small ones at the top, right? And we're going to knock those out. I'm going to make those monthly payments. Even if I can't pay more, I'm just going to be consistent. Let's get consistency, paid on time, because that's going to help my credit score go up. And then when I eliminate that small debt, remember, the key is, if I don't have that $25 payment anymore because I got rid of that debt, that doesn't mean that you have $25 more dollars now to spend. It means that you're going to roll that 25 extra dollars into the next debt. And so let's say in your next debt, you were paying $75 a month. You're adding that 25 to it, and now you're paying 100. Now is where the snowball picks up speed and steam going downhill, right? So you're just moving what was one payment and adding it to the next to pay that next debt off quicker, and so on and so forth, all the way down the hill. Okay? Now, you'll get some of those initial victories, but at some point, as you know, as you can see just from the visual, you're going to have to get to the large debt. Maybe it's a student loan. Maybe it's your car payment, whatever it is. It's not going to go away as quickly unless you're dumping a ton of money into those payments. I'm just assuming that right now, the majority of us don't have extra discretionary income to say, I'm just going to throw an extra $500 a month at this particular debt. Like, we can think of a lot of other ways to use $500 a month right now. Right? So let's just know that that's probably going to be a long-term goal. Maybe that's our goal for spring of 2021, or maybe it's even farther out than that, right? Let's just be realistic about that. But let's plan for those small victories up front so that we can say, man, 2020 was a bust, but I got rid of 3 of my credit cards. So that was a victory. And they were small, but hey, that's good news. Or you could work in the reverse, right? You could start with the biggest debts, and it's called a debt avalanche because you're throwing everything at those big debts, and hopefully those big debts will loosen up and fall down the rest of the mountain, right? But we sort of have to balance with that our interest rates, because even the small debts at high interest could potentially grow at a faster rate than could our larger debts at lower interest. So it is about balancing what you have. So that's why I said in the beginning, you can't walk into this going, well, I know what I owe, but I have no idea what the interest rates are. I'm just going to start paying. You may find yourself at the end very disappointed because you had that 23% interest rate card and you saved it for last. And all that time, it was growing. So we have to be mindful of what we can pay and then also how it's growing from month to month and sort of the damage, the effect that our payments are actually having, right? If all of this is too much for you to do, take it one debt at a time. If you are paralyzed by that, come talk to me. I'll help you walk through it step by step. I'll force you to organize it. We'll look at it debt by debt. If I have to get on the phone with you, we'll conference call Chase or wherever, right? And if that doesn't help, then I would say contact the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, because then, like, let's just admit that we need more help, right? Any questions on that?
I like the part where you said you'll conference in with us if we need that help.
Yeah. So the way that I do that, not so that it's weird, is it happens all the time, actually, and I've done it for years.
No way, really?
Yeah, as a financial planner. So I do it on people's, investment accounts, on their retirement accounts. I do it for, with banks or whatever. So we would conference, say with Visa, and I would say, hi, my name is Bryan, and I'm Christina's financial planner. And they would say, oh, Christina, do you give us authorization to speak to you and your financial planner, Bryan, who is on the line? Because obviously they need your permission to talk about anything related. Because all you need to be telling them is that I just want to make sure that I have somebody taking notes and somebody that's asking the right sorts of questions in the language that you guys work in, because this is not what I do every single day. So I just want to make sure that I understand what you're telling me and I'm asking the right questions.
I like that.
Yeah. We might as well tackle it as a team. All right. What if we could use COVID right now to, like I said, replenish our savings? I think one of the things that we have to remember is we get comfortable living paycheck to paycheck. It's scary, but we've sort of learned to bathe in that fear. And I'm guilty of that too. Like, first, we're stressed, we're anxious, we're chewing on our fingernails. It's very stressful. Of course, we don't want it to be like that. But then once we sort of figure out how to navigate it and make things work, then it's almost like we give it permission to be that way. And so why not during this time stop and say, you know what? I don't want to live like this anymore. What can I do, even in the smallest ways, to not live on the edge? And maybe that is just saving a little bit extra, keeping more cash on hand, right? People are always worried about cash because we've always been told that having cash just sitting there, it's not earning, it's not working for us. It's a stupid money move. Now, if you had hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash and it wasn't earning anything, then yes. But for a majority of Americans, right, we're always told you should have 3 to 6 months of income in your savings. No, I don't have that, right? So even if we have $100, $200, whatever it is, let's get comfortable with having liquidity in the bank for what ifs, for opportunities, for emergency situations, however we want to see it, both positive or negative. We have cash on hand. I mean, if anything, COVID has taught us that absolutely anything out of the blue can happen. In January, February, we had zero clue. I mean, the average American had zero clue what was about to happen. Had somebody tipped us off, right, or told us that there's a possibility of a global pandemic, we would have been saving like nobody's business, knowing what we were about to face, right? So why don't we just operate like COVID's not going to go away, or there could be something worse around, God forbid, around the corner. Let's just imagine that that could potentially happen in order to propel us to saving more. And it's okay if you're not earning anything on it, because interest rates are zero anyways. So even if you put it into a savings account at Wells Fargo, B of A, Chase, wherever, you're going to get less than 0.5%. And like we talked about, whatever you earn is going to be 1099 and taxed anyways. So those pennies that you're going to earn are going to be taxed because Uncle Sam wants his part of it. And even if you put it in an online savings account, like I've mentioned before, you'd at this point be hard pressed to even get 1%, right? So, I mean, let's just save for peace of mind, right? So keep pushing yourself. If this month you can only save $10, then that's what it is. But next month, set a goal. Maybe it's 15, 20, maybe you double it. Maybe the IRS finally gets around to getting you your refund because you just filed a couple weeks ago. Don't mentally spend it. Put it in your savings. Just find ways that you can save more and be okay with it just letting it sit there. You don't have to spend it. You don't have to use it. Just let it be. I think we have to get more comfortable with that. Longer term, let's use this time. We checked our credit. We're looking at our savings. Why not take a look at Social Security? This is something that most people don't even bother to even like really think about. Because, well, Brian, I'm not even close to 62. Why would I want to think about Social Security? Well, we know that time goes by very quickly, right? And we do have to be thinking even longer term about retirement. And one of the things that we can be doing right now is just sort of planning for another stream of income in retirement. Now, it might not be a majority of income because maybe you're not going to get that much, right? But Social Security, think of it as maybe icing on the cake, is going to give you some amount of money in retirement that you're going to use in combination with your savings, with maybe employer retirement funds. Maybe you sell a home or you sell an asset. You know, we're going to have to put together these streams of income, right? So it used to be that Social Security would send you a statement. They would send you an annual statement. And then for a couple of years, they did away with it to save money because the majority of the population didn't care about getting a Social Security statement. I'm not old. I don't need to look at this. And so they went totally online and only mailed statements to people who were 60 and older. And for us babies, we would have to go online and log in to see it. You could still do that. So the website is www.ssa.gov. You can go create an account and you can log in right now today and see at age 62, which is the first age, the first year in which you can begin taking Social Security, what monthly amount you would get. So they project that on your statement. But you don't have to take Social Security at 62 because maybe your plan is, you know, Brian, I think I'm gonna be still young at 62. I'm going to be healthy. I want to keep working, stay sharp, and still make money. Fine. You don't have to take Social Security at 62. They call it the FRA, the full retirement age at Social Security is at 66. So if you waited till age 66 to turn on Social Security, your statement will show you here's what you would get every month at age 66 if you waited 4 years from age 62. And you're going to actually get more at age 66 per month. Why? Because you waited. And because you may have more working years under your belt, which changes the amount that you get. Because Social Security is based off of our Social Security payroll taxes, what we put into the system and for how long we've done it. So if I had a W-2 job, let's say for 5 years, and then the rest of my years, I'm self-employed, right? I have to be paying my self-employed Social Security taxes in order to get something out of it. If I don't, I only have 5 working years that's going to make up my total monthly payment. and that's not going to be very much. Some of you will be W-2 wage earners for 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, however long you work, because you've worked for a company. You haven't been self-employed, right? And so that statement is going to show every single year that you've worked since maybe you were 16. And it will show what you paid into Social Security that year when you were 16. And so it's a combination of all these working years plus what you paid in, and then the age at which you retire. You might not take Social Security at 66 and wait even longer, right? And you'll get paid even more per month from Social Security. On average, the math, it comes out to about an 8% increase per year for every year that you wait, right? Now, we may get to 62 and decide, I know I'm getting a lot less per month, but I just need the money. And you'll take it. And that's fine. That's a part of your plan. If you can plan to wait, you'll obviously get more per month, but you're going to be getting it later. So you don't have the advantage of using it up front. Okay. The reason the statement is so important is that just like unemployment, Social Security Administration doesn't want you coming in just to like ask questions, right? They don't want you sitting down with a caseworker to just say, so I'm 47 and I'd like to know what my payment would be. They don't have time for that. They only want to deal with you if you're going to file, if you're going to start collecting, if you're going to turn on Social Security, right? So that's why the statement is so important. That's why the website is so important, right? They just went back to mailing out statements again. But if for some reason you haven't seen one in a while, or maybe you accidentally shredded it or threw it away or never opened it, you can go back on the website and log in today, right? On average, for the person that's worked 30, 35 years and is paid into the system the entire time, the average monthly payment at full retirement age is about $2,500 a month, right? So that seems like a fair amount of money. But for some of us, that could be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Who knows what that amount will be and how far that will go in terms of cost of living. In terms of inflation, what will inflation be like then? There's even been rumors, and it happens every time I talk about it, is, oh, I heard that the government can't pay out Social Security anymore because the government is in so much debt, like we can't fund this program anymore. And Social Security is going to be insolvent or basically dead in like a year or whatever, because of those darn baby boomers. All of that that World War II generation that retired at the same time. We right now, the taxpayers right now, are trying to fund the Social Security for those retirees. And there's just so many of them. I forget what the statistic was, but it was something crazy, like multiple baby boomers were retiring every 10 seconds or whatever they broke the math down to, right? And so a lot of like young people are worried like Social Security won't even exist by the time they retire. I don't think that's going to be the situation. I don't think the government is going to, whether this system breaks, the government's going to find some way to replace it, fix it, keep it going, do something, because there's just going to be no way that our population can retire without it, right? So depending on what you put into it, you may only get $400 a month, right? That's why reviewing your statement is important, because you got to know how to plan. You got to know that it's accurate. Maybe you're working as a 1099 employee for somebody, you're working as an independent contractor, and you thought that they were paying into Social Security for you, right? And they're not. I mean, you got to be able to fix that. You can't get 5 years down the road and be like, oh shoot, that employer never paid in for me. What the heck? I mean, by law, they're supposed to. So again, it's sort of like checking your credit history in that you got to know what's going on, especially even with Social Security. Now, if you continue to work, you can also collect Social Security at the same time. Okay, so let's say you're 66, you're still feeling good, you're still sharp, you can work and collect Social Security at the same time, but your Social Security amount can be reduced depending on how much you make per year. Don't quote me, but I'll have to double check, but it's somewhere around, I want to say like 40,000. If you were to make 40,000 or more, it changes from year to year. That's why I'm saying don't quote me on this year's amount. I didn't check that. But if you make a certain amount and you make above that amount, it will reduce your Social Security benefits. So there's also that to know going forward. Yeah, you may feel healthy. Yeah, you may want to continue to work, but maybe you have to control and plan your work in such a way not to make over that limit, right? So you make just under, you're still making income and you're still collecting your full Social Security amount and it's not being reduced, okay? Now, there's other complicated scenarios that I won't get into. That's probably for another workshop where we'll talk about what if I'm widowed? What if my spouse passed away? Can I collect their Social Security? What happens in the case of a divorce? What happens with Social Security? Can I collect a portion of my ex's Social Security? What if I have children who are getting beneficiary benefits from Social Security because a spouse has passed? What happens when they get to a certain age? What happens when I start collecting on that? Like, are there going to be reduction of benefits? We could have a whole like workshop on that alone. Okay. Because there's complicated scenarios and yeah, everybody is different. And maybe we do plan for something like that.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to touch on today, and then I'll let you go, is again, let's think through how we can use this time going forward to maybe get more help where we may need it, right? So maybe if you haven't contacted your bank, like we talked about before, can you eliminate some fees? Just ask. Worst case, they say no. Okay, fine. That just leaves you right where you are anyways, but at least ask. It can't hurt. Can you reduce fees? I'm having issues because of COVID, because of employment, and you keep charging me these overdrafts. Is there a way to reduce some of those fees? Why do I have to pay for a savings account? I've been with you guys for 15 years, for 20 years, and yet you're charging me $15 a month just to save my own money. I'd rather not take my business somewhere else, but I will if you can't help me out. I mean, that's something that they should easily be able to do, right? Again, have you contacted your lenders? Maybe you've been putting off even filing for unemployment because you're scared of the process. Because you see the numbers in the news, millions of people filing for unemployment, systems backlogged, you can't talk to a human being. Maybe you're just scared. And maybe you're just, again, living on the edge and being comfortable with it because you don't want to go through that process, right? So whatever fears are keeping you from doing that, maybe we need to get on that. Christina's a good person to talk to. You can talk to me. We can help get you going in the right direction, right?
If you could find employment during COVID, you could do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Have you communicated with your utility companies? Okay, now they're not just letting you not pay, but they're not shutting off services for non-payment, which is good, which also means that they're going to be open to flexible payment plans. So maybe you can't cover this month, your utilities aren't going to be turned off, but maybe you need to work out for the following month when you have a double bill, how that can be worked out. The only way it can be worked out is if you contact them and communicate that with them. Maybe you're in a situation where you need childcare help. Okay. State of California has a lot of help and options for finding childcare. And what I mean by finding childcare here is not just like, a neighbor who's going to watch your kid. What I mean here is licensed daycare, childcare facilities that even during COVID, right, are under strict restrictions to keep their place sanitary, clean, are distanced, and are managing not 40 children at a time.
Right.
Right? That are managing small amounts of children to keep everybody healthy and safe. Right? So mychildcare.ca.gov is a great place for that. Maybe you haven't tapped into food benefits. I had just a while ago mentioned to you guys, even just checking with food banks, LA Food Bank, local food banks in the Valley. But let's go beyond that. What about the CalFresh program? What about WIC, right? California Meals for Kids. If your child was getting a lunch through school, almost every district is trying to keep that up. I have a friend who works for LA Unified.
They're doing a great job.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
They really are.
He works in administration for LA Unified, and he said one of their biggest jobs has been feeding kids. So it's not even about figuring out how to get back into class at this point. Their biggest number one priority is the amount of food and meals that they're supplying for not only kids, but also for families as well, where there are numerous drive-through spots where you can pick up groceries.
Yeah.
So this is all out there happening. Some of us just don't know about it because we're in our house, we're stuck. So we don't know what's going on out there. And these are just, 3 quick examples of things that you can access. And then have you used special programs like we talked about last week with CalAble? If there's something that you feel like, you need assistance with, and it doesn't match any of these sort of categories, ask Christina and I, and we can either have the answer or we're going to find the answer for you. So we'll take that on for you and get you some resources. That's the whole point of us being here. And it works out better when we're working as a team. We're not going to just send you out and be like, well, good luck, go find that, and let us know what you find.
And a lot of people have the same questions that they're just not asking. So like when Evelyn presented the credit questions, there were several other people that when I included on that email that were like, oh, I was wondering that same thing. So
great.
Good to ask those questions.
Yeah. And I mean, all of these sorts of questions kind of come to us in different ways, shapes, and forms. And so, that's the reason we bring this up. That's the reason we're talking about food benefits. That's the reason we're talking about childcare, unemployment. I'm sure, Christina, you've dealt with unemployment more in the last 4 months than you probably did over years.
I've never, ever applied for unemployment ever before in my life. So this was like a whole new experience for me. And boy, have I learned some things.
So thank you guys so much for being here today. And again, if you're working on something and you need help, like I'm saying, now is the time during COVID to make some progress on stuff. And we're here to help. And also too, Arlene, as you talk to other people and they have questions about CalAble, or you're telling them about, hey, tackling your debt or whatever, and they want to contact us, they want to reach out to Christina, they want to reach out to Family Promise, you can always direct them towards us as well.
Yeah. We welcome that and invite that, please.
Yeah. We're all about making friends. So
yeah.
I know a lot of people wants to, learn more. I will send you.
Okay, sure.
Okay, great. Yeah, just shoot me an email.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, okay, good.
Perfect. Okay, you guys have a great day.
Thank you so much, guys, both of you. Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
so much.
Okay.
Have a
bye.
good weekend. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks.